Hello, Biology 130 students, and welcome to an introduction to human anatomy and physiology. This is just a brief overview of how the mechanics of the course work. I'm not actually going to get into any of the course content here, but this is just to basically allow you to become acquainted with how the course works and what you're supposed to be doing every week. So, my name is Greg Doheny. I'll be your instructor for this course. That's me over here. Some of you have had me for other courses, and welcome back if you've had me for other courses. If not, welcome. My email address is gdoheny@columbiacollege.ca. You can contact me anytime you like with questions about the course. We will have an office hour for this course, which will be delivered on Fridays from 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock using the Teams program. And if you go to the Moodle page for the course, if you log in on the Moodle page, of course, obviously, if you're watching this video, you've already found your way to the Moodle page. But if you go to the Moodle page, you'll see that there's a link that gives you a PDF which teaches you how to download the Teams program if you don't already have it. Now, at the end of the first week, I'm going to set up the Teams group for Biology 130 and add all of your names and addresses to it. So you will see an invitation to join the Biology 130 office hour on Friday. It'll appear on your calendar, and attendance is not mandatory, and if you do attend, you do not have to turn on your camera. The office hour is only for your benefit. It's not part of the instruction, so it's for your benefit in case you have any extra or additional questions for me. Now, you'll notice that there's also there's a questions forum on the Moodle page, where if you have questions about the course material or about the mechanics of the course or anything like that, you can post your question there and I'll answer it in public. And it's nice to do that if you can, because then there may be other students who have the same question, and so if I answer your question, then they can read the answer as well. So if you can, it's always good to post questions on the questions forum, but if you'd rather not ask questions in public, you can always come to the office hour, and if you're worried that somebody else might see you during the office hour, because it is, it's a chat room basically, you're worried that somebody else might see you during the office hour, you can feel free to email me as well. Now, this particular course this winter, this is the winter session 2021, and this is section 17 of Biology 130, which means that our meeting times, in case you're not familiar with the Columbia College method of designating different sections, section 17 means that we meet on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 4 to 6. Now, the only times that you will actually be required to be online are Wednesdays. You are required to be online every Wednesday because we have our testing on Wednesday. So every Wednesday you're going to do a quiz, and you're going to do an open book exercise, which I'll explain momentarily. But basically, you're going to buy a coloring book, which is the Anatomy Coloring Workbook, which is by I.L. Camo. And every week I will be assigning you to read a chapter from that book. And then every week you will do an open book exercise where you log onto the computer on Wednesday from 4 o'clock until 5:30, and you do an open book exercise where I ask you questions about the chapter from the coloring book that you just read. And for the open book exercise, as the name open book exercise implies, the open book exercises, you are allowed to have the book in front of you. It's not considered cheating if you're looking at the book. In fact, I intend for you to do that. The open book exercise the purpose of the open book exercise is to basically force you to read the textbook and then read it and study it well enough that you can answer questions on it using the book itself as a reference material. Now, so you're allowed to read I wouldn't recommend reading the chapter and trying to answer the questions at the same time, because you only have a half an hour, or you only have 1.5 hours. And there's really not enough time to read the chapter and ask the questions, and answer the questions rather. So the idea is that you will read the book ahead of time, And then you will know, as you're going through the open book exercise, you will know the material well enough to know where you can, which page you have to turn to look for the answer. Now, the following week, we will do a quiz. There'll actually be a quiz every Wednesday from 5:30 to 6, which you are supposed to do without the book. And the quiz contains questions. Some of the questions in the quiz will be from the open book test that you did the previous week and all of the weeks before that. So it's to your advantage to do the open book test, because you get asked questions that you will see again. So the questions that you answer in the open book test this week could be some of those questions will reappear in the quiz the following week. Right, so that's how the quizzes work. The quizzes are questions about the coloring book the answers to which you should have committed to memory by then. So it is to your advantage to do the open book exercise, and then when the open book exercise is finished, you have the option of going to look at the answers that you got right and the answers that you got wrong. And then you should take note of the answers that you got wrong and study them and find out what the right answer is, because that question could appear again in many future quizzes. So another thing that you need to remember about the Wednesday quiz and the Wednesday open book exam is that you have the opportunity to look at the answers and see what the correct answers are, but after 1 week, that quiz and that open book test that you wrote will disappear. Right, because we don't want you to have access to the correct answers indefinitely, because we don't want you to just be able to go and look them up. We want you to commit them to memory. That's the whole idea of taking a course. So do the open book test and then go and find out after, the next day or something like that, go back and look to see what the correct answers actually are if you got any of them wrong. And then do the quiz, and then the next day go and look to see what the correct answers are for the questions that you got wrong, and then study those so you won't get them wrong again, because those questions could appear again on future quizzes or on the midterm or the final exam. Okay, so you do need to be online every Wednesday in order to take the weekly open book test and the weekly weekly quiz. There are 2 occasions during the semester where you need to be online on a Tuesday. One of them is Tuesday, February 16th, when we have something called the muscle test. It's a 2-hour test from 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, February 16th, where you answer nothing but questions about muscles. And it's worth 3% of your exam. And the reason why we do that is because muscles are such an important part of anatomy and physiology that we felt that it deserved a separate test all by itself. That isn't to say that you won't get asked muscle questions on other tests, but there will be one entire test that's devoted to nothing but muscles. Similarly, on Tuesday, March 16th, there will be, on Tuesday, March 16th from 4 to 6, there will be a test dedicated entirely to blood vessels. That's also worth 3% of your mark. So that means that every Wednesday you need to be online for an open book test, which I assign you from the coloring book, and a quiz, which is questions from all the previous open book tests plus some others. And then on 2 occasions, Tuesday, February 16th and Tuesday, March 16th, those are Tuesdays when you have to be online as well in order to do these theme quizzes. And then Friday we have our office hour, which is outside of quote-unquote class time, even though we're not actually in the class, and that is voluntary. Okay, so now in addition to the coloring workbook, there is a free textbook that we recommend for this course called Anatomy by Betts et al. Betts, and that means colleagues, et al. Means colleagues, and it is a free book which you can download from the internet. I gave you the address on the Moodle page. You can either download it or you can read it directly off the internet. You don't actually have to download it, and you certainly don't have to print it. It's entirely up to you. Personally, when I study material like books, I like to print a hard copy or buy a hard copy because I love to scribble notes in the margins, and I love to take a yellow highlighter pen, sort of like the one that you're seeing on your screen now. They sell these highlighter pens that you can use to highlight important phrases in yellow. That's a very common way to study. That's how most of us got through our undergraduate degrees, by scribbling notes in the margin and by highlighting in yellow key phrases, so that you can go back and study them again without having to read the whole chapter again. So that's a common study technique to highlight, and you can't really do that if you have the book as a PDF file or if you're reading the book online. It's easier to do that sort of thing if you're actually reading a physical piece of paper. But nevertheless, that's your decision. If you're able to study without the paper, that's fine, because then you're not killing trees to create paper. Anyway, so those are the important information. You have my name, my email address. You know when the office hours are. You know how to get to the office hour through the Teams program. You will have a Teams calendar that lists the office hours for you. You are required to be online every Wednesday, because we're doing an open book exercise and a quiz on Wednesday. There are 2 Tuesdays during the year when you'll have to be online as well, February 16th and March 16th. You are required to buy the anatomy coloring workbook, because the open book exercises are based on that, as are the questions from the quizzes. And you are advised but not required to download and read the OpenStax anatomy textbook as well, for some additional background information. So once again, with the office hours, it is a online office hours using the Microsoft Teams program. If you attend, attendance is voluntary, not mandatory, not compulsory. If you do attend, you're not required to turn on your camera. The only time you're required to be online are Wednesdays from 4 to 6 and 2 different Tuesdays from 4 to 6, February 16th and March 16th. The coloring book you need to buy, because it also within the coloring book, it's kind of funny, but it's been proven that if you coloring in diagrams in different colors according to instructions is an effective way of learning anatomy, and so we're going to continue that tradition. So on your right, you see the coloring book, what it looks like. On the left are some crayons. You should buy some crayons and I advise you to complete the exercises inside. So if you go through every page as you're going through the chapter, you color in certain, the book will tell you to color in certain arteries in red and certain veins in blue and certain nerves in yellow and so on. And that helps you to learn where they are and what their spatial orientation is with regards to each other, relative to each other. And that helps you to learn anatomy. Now, when we do this course, we're doing this course by remote learning in this case, because there's a pandemic and we can't do it at the college. But at the college we have a whole anatomy lab that we use every week, where you get to study the anatomical models and things like that. And we would generally have a quiz and an open book test every week in the anatomy lab. However, because we're doing this by remote control, we can't do that. Now, when we do it live, when we do it in person, I actually assign everyone to do the coloring assignment, and then I check to see that they've actually done it. You have to show me, if we were doing this in a live in-person classroom, I would ask you to show me your coloring book at the beginning of every lab session so I can confirm that you actually did the coloring assignment. Obviously, I can't check that when you're at home and we're doing this course by remote learning, but that's okay. I advise you to do the coloring, but that's up to you. I advise you to do it, but I will not be checking that you're doing the coloring work. So there are coloring assignments inside the coloring book which you're to color in. So for instance, the instructions might tell you to color the parietal skull plate blue and the frontal skull plate yellow and the occipital skull plate red, which is what you see here on the right rather. Right, so you do all these coloring in different things, and then you learn the names and the positions of these bones and these various organs and things like that from this. So that's the whole idea. And as I said, this coloring book is available through Amazon.ca, but it's also available through a number of other booksellers. And if you have friends that have taken this course in the past and they're willing to sell you their textbook, a used copy of the coloring book, that's fine. That's fine. It may have already been colored in, so you don't get to color it yourself, but nevertheless you'll still get it. I just care that it's just important that you get it, because you can't do the assignments without it. Now, the recommended textbook. It is available from an open source, open educational resource facility, which is called OpenStax. OpenStax provides a whole lot of free textbooks. You may realize, or you may be aware, you may not be aware, that at Columbia College, we are we are moving towards free textbooks because we realize that textbooks for students are expensive. It represents a significant expense for the student. And so we are doing everything we can to reduce costs for the student. And one of the things we can do is to move to these free textbooks. Now, there is not a free textbook available for every possible course, so you'll notice that at Columbia, not every course has a free textbook. There are many courses that have expensive textbooks that you need to buy, and we apologize for that. We're sorry about that, but we have no choice because at the moment there is no free textbook available. But we're lucky in the anatomy and physiology course because there is a free textbook that's available through OpenStax. And so you can download that book and read it. I would advise you to concentrate mostly on the coloring book and mostly on the lectures. You do have to take notes from the lectures and all that sort of thing, because most of the questions that in fact, all of the questions that I will be asking you, the answers can be found in the coloring book and in the lectures. I would read the anatomy and physiology book by Betts if you need further information or you want to go deeper into a subject. That's up to you. So I say that the anatomy and physiology book from OpenStax is recommended. It's highly recommended, but not required that you read it. You do have to buy the coloring book, and you definitely do have to watch and learn and take notes from the from the lectures. All right, so let's talk about how the rest of the course works. Okay, so what are we going to learn? I will now tell you basically what you're going to spend your time doing every week for this course. First of all, anatomy is traditionally taught using organ systems. So for instance, in the old days, doctors and physicians used to try and learn about the human body by memorizing the names and the functions of every part without any system or any order to what they're memorizing. But then they discovered that people had found it much easier to memorize the names and the functions of all the body parts if you studied the body parts that are related to each other and the body parts that are involved in the same functions as a group. And so the organs that are all involved in the same process, the same biological process, are considered to be an organ system. And so, for example, all of the bones are considered to be the skeletal system. We call that the skeletal system, so they give the body support and so on. Then the muscles help the bones to move. We call that the muscular system. Combined, these two organ systems are sometimes called the musculoskeletal system. So you would learn about those together, basically. If you take the brain and the spinal cord and all of the nerves that come out of the spinal cord, that's called the nervous system, right? So you would spend a week or two learning the names of the important nerves and the different parts of the brain, which is what we're going to do. And then the circulatory system includes the heart and the blood vessels. So then you spend a week learning about the heart, and then you learn the names of the key blood vessels and so on. But you learn the different organs that are related to the same functions at the same time. So this is called an organ systems approach to learning anatomy. It's been used now for about 150 years, and it seems to work much better than the old system of just memorizing the parts regardless of what they do. And so we're going to respect that system. We're going to respect that method of teaching anatomy and physiology. Okay, so what you'll do each week, if you go to the Moodle page for this course and you simply scroll down the page, you'll see that I've told you what to do every week. And there are a number of links on every week. There's a little section for every week what you're supposed to do, and there are links to different videos and documents and so on that are highlighted in blue. And if you click on those links, the web page will simply take you there. Right, so each week what you'll do is we're going to study, generally, we're going to study one and sometimes two organ systems per week. So let's say that we're studying one organ system per week. So the first thing you do is you watch a lecture, a video of a lecture that I've given on this. The lecture videos look a lot like what you're looking at right now. And so you watch a lecture video on one of the organ systems. If necessary, I have also included the lecture slides on the website so that you can just look at the slide portion without having to listen to all the narration. Right, so there will also be, for each week, there'll be a PDF file on the website where you can just click on it and view the slides alone without the narration. If you're still confused, feel free to read the anatomy textbook, the OpenStax anatomy textbook. And then each week I will be assigning you to read a chapter from the anatomy coloring workbook on the same organ system. So if we're in week 8, for instance, the subject, the organ system of that week is the cardiovascular system, the heart and the blood vessels. So I will give a lecture on the cardiovascular system, and then I'll assign you to read the anatomy and coloring workbook chapter on the cardiovascular system, the circulatory system. And then on the Wednesday of each week, you have to write 2 little tests on that system and some other things. So on Wednesday, you complete what's known as an open book test on the cardiovascular system. An open book test means that you are allowed to have the anatomy and physiology coloring book in front of you while you're doing the test. You are assigned to read the chapter. You will be assigned to read the chapter on the cardiovascular system before you start the open book test, because if you try, you'll be given an hour and a half to complete the open book test, and the test will ask you multiple choice questions about things that you've read in that chapter. And so you're given an hour and a half to do it. The number of questions for the open book test will vary, but generally it's around 40 or 50, sometimes up to 70 or 80 questions. And they're not hard. They are multiple choice questions, but you will not have time to read the chapter and look for the answers to the questions in the book at the same time. That's why I say you must read the book, read the coloring book chapter ahead of time, and then take the open book test, so that when I ask you the questions, these multiple choice questions, you'll have an idea of approximately where in that chapter to look. Right? You'll have an idea of approximately where to look. So if you try to read the chapter and then answer the questions while the test is in progress, you'll never have enough time to finish. Okay, so every week you will complete an open book test. This is where you're allowed to look at the book. Right? All of the other tests, you're not allowed to look at any books. You have to do the exercise or the test or the exam from memory. You're not allowed to look at a book. You're not allowed to search the internet. You're not allowed to communicate with anybody else. That's a general rule for all of the tests. You are never allowed to communicate with anybody else for any of these tests. You can't talk to anybody. You can't ask anybody's advice. You can't text anybody. You can't Google things. You can't look in Wikipedia during a test. That's a general rule for all exams and all tests at Columbia College, as well as all of the other colleges and universities around the world. All right, so the open book test, because it's called an open book test, specifically tells you that the one thing you're allowed to do on these tests, the open book tests, is to look in your coloring book. I would not advise to look in any other book, because the questions I'm asking you, I took the questions out of this book. So if you're looking in another book, or if you do a Google search, which of course you're not allowed to do, but if you do that anyway, you will get an answer that's not in the book, and that answer will be wrong. So I strongly advise you not to be tempted to cheat on any of these exams by Googling things or looking in Wikipedia or looking at any of the other websites that offer this kind of information, because the answers to all the tests that I give come out of the coloring book or the textbook or my lecture. If you give a different answer that you got from searching the internet, for instance, that answer is different than the one I taught you, then it would be wrong. So I don't advise doing that. Okay, now, in addition to the open book test on Wednesday, which you'll be given an hour and a half to complete, each Wednesday you'll also be given a 20-minute quiz on all of the previous readings. So for instance, if during week 3 we study histology, that means that during week 3 you'll have to read the chapter on histology from the coloring book, and then you'll do an open book test on histology on Wednesday. And then that's fine. And then the following week, if we're doing the bone system, the skeletal system, you'll do a reading chapter on the skeletal system in the coloring book. You'll do an open book chapter on the skeletal system, and then you'll have a quiz on everything up before that week, everything that preceded that week. So that would include the readings that you did the week before on histology. So the quiz and the open book test are all multiple choice. For the open book test, you get 1.5 hours to complete it. You may have up to 50, 60 questions or so, but the answers can be found in the book, and you're allowed to look in the book during the open book test. During the quiz, you have 20 minutes to complete 40 questions. Now that may not seem like much time, and I realize that it's stressful. It's actually intended to be a little bit stressful, mainly because we learn things better if we're under a little bit of stress, right? So if we're not under stress at all, we tend not to learn anything. If we're under too much stress, we don't learn anything that way either. But a little bit of stress is helpful, right? And creating a little bit of stress with a restricted time frame is actually helpful to the learning process. And so you're given only 20 minutes to complete 40 multiple choice questions, and those multiple choice questions could have come from any of the previous week's readings from the coloring book. Right, so the 20-minute tests that you'll be doing every week are cumulative. They include questions from all of the previous sections. Now, the purpose of the open book test is to give you a reason to read and study and scrutinize your anatomy and coloring workbook. And the purpose of the 20-minute quiz is to give you a reason, to give you an incentive to review the material that you've already learned regularly. So every week we have the open book test and we have the 20-minute quiz on the previous material, which means that every week it's in your interest to do a little review of what you learned previously. Probably, I was a student for a very long time, and I know good things and bad things about being a student. And one of the bad things about being a student is when you study something and then you learn it just long enough to write the test, and then when you pass the test, and when the test is over, you forget it. And the reason why you forget it is because you didn't practice retrieving the information that you learned. So learning it is not enough. You have to practice retrieving the information frequently, and then you'll find that if you review the information that you've learned in the previous weeks regularly, pretty soon you won't have to review it anymore because it will be committed to memory. You will know it, and you won't have to review it anymore. And that is the whole idea. Right, so the open book test is to basically pay you with marks for reading the book and studying the book, and then the quiz is paying you with marks to review the material regularly. And so that basically I'm rewarding you with points, with marks for the course for studying and reviewing, which many other courses may not do. But I know that it's very important that these things be done, so that's why I'm actually rewarding you with marks for doing it. So there are 11 open book tests. They're worth 2% each. That's 22% of your grade. There are 11 weekly quizzes, 2% each. That's worth another 22%. So the lab, what's known as the lab section of this course, is worth 44% of your grade. In addition to that, so that the lab, what are known as the lab exercises, watching the video, reviewing the slides, reading the chapter from the coloring book, doing the open book test, and doing the 20-minute quiz. Those are what will take up most of your time for the week. Another thing about the short time frame for the quiz is that again, it's meant to be done from memory. You're not allowed to talk to anybody, communicate with anybody, not allowed to look up answers anyplace. And so by giving you just 30 seconds to answer each question, I've made it impossible. I haven't given you enough time to look anything up. And that's the idea. Sadly, if we were doing this in the classroom and I could be sure that you're not looking in a book to find the answers, then we might give you more time. But because we're forced to do this over the internet during the pandemic, we have to do it a little differently. So this is one of the sacrifices that we've had to make in order to make this course work as a distance education course. Okay, so those exercises will take up most of your time during the week. In addition, there'll be a midterm exam, which is slightly different than these quizzes because they're not multiple choice. The midterm exam will be short answers, short essay questions, and a few multiple choice questions as well. The midterm exam is worth 20%, and there will be a final exam worth 30%. Again, the final exam will be the same format as the midterm. It will contain some multiple choice questions, but also some short answer questions, one-word questions, and some short essay questions where you have to write 200 words or less about a certain system or something like that, those types of questions. Right? And in addition to that, because muscles are so important to anatomy and there are a lot of muscles to memorize, there will be a muscle quiz that will be worth 3% of your grade. And because blood vessels are so important, there are so many blood vessels to learn the names of, there will be a blood vessel test that's worth 3% of your mark as well. Right, so the lab section, the weekly quiz, and the weekly open book test, all of those together will be worth 44% of your grade, 20% for the midterm, 30% for the final, and then 3% for the muscle test, 3% for the blood vessel test. And if you're curious about the exact date of the midterm and the final, there is a course calendar on this website. You can follow the link and you can take a look at it. All right, now just a little word about the videos. One of the good features about the videos is that they are stored on YouTube. So you can see that the videos are actually stored on YouTube. So when you click on the link, it will take you to a framed YouTube video. If you then click on the word YouTube on the bottom right-hand side of the YouTube screen, it will take you to the YouTube website. And then under these dots, see these dots here in the bottom corner? You will find another menu. If one of the options is that you can click on Open Transcript, and it will open up a transcript, closed caption transcript of the words that I'm speaking. So if you're having trouble understanding my words as I'm speaking them, YouTube is great because it gives you the option of reading the transcript instead. Right, so here's the word pectoralis major, which is part of the transcript, right? So if I pronounce pectoralis major poorly and you don't understand, or I said it too fast and it's hard to, I'm speaking too fast and it's hard to follow me, you can simply activate the transcript. You can do that with this video too right now. You can do that with this video and try out the transcript. So that's one of the big advantages to doing this course over the internet as opposed to doing it in the classroom, because you have the option of reading the transcript. Okay, so what do these quizzes look like? So you read a chapter every week and then you do an open book test and a 20-minute quiz. What do they look like? Okay, so this is what your Moodle page looks like. This is just one of the weeks from your Moodle page. If you scroll down, you'll find it. And then you'll see that on week 8, we talk about the cardiovascular system. And then you see here it says watch lecture 10 part 1. So if you click on that blue link, it will take you to the YouTube video. You can watch the video, read the transcript, whatever you like. There's actually 3 parts to that particular lecture. I'm sorry about that because it's a cardiovascular system is a very complicated organ system. So for that week only, we actually have to watch 3 lectures. But nevertheless, you watch the lectures, you go to YouTube, watch the lectures. You have the option of reading the slides without the narration. Right? That sometimes is faster to get through them. Then for that particular week, the Moodle page tells you to read chapter 7 in your coloring workbook on the cardiovascular system. And then when you're convinced you're ready, then prepare yourself for the test, which is on Wednesday. Now this is a mistake because I'm showing you the Moodle page from the summer version of the course when the quiz was on a different day. But for you, it's going to be on Wednesday. Okay, so you open the anatomy quiz. It will appear. You click on that at the correct time, which will be 4 o'clock on Wednesday, right? And this will appear. So this will tell you that the quiz is not available until Thursday, September 3rd at 4 p.m. and the quiz will close on Thursday, September 3rd at 4:20, which means that you have only 20 minutes to write the quiz, as I said. And then you click on this little bar here, and that allows you to begin the quiz. Okay, so then it presents you with a bunch of multiple choice questions. So this particular one is actually from the nervous system. So here the question is, what do you call the mucous membrane that covers the outer surface of the eye and which is colored white? And you have 4 options, right? I've clicked on ocular conjunctiva, right? And then once you've entered your answer, remember you only have about 30 seconds to answer. Then you move to the next page and you answer the next question. Right? After the test is closed, after the test is over, you actually have the ability to view the correct answers. So you can view your mistakes and you can learn from your mistakes this way, and it's to your advantage to do that, because if you're doing this as an open book test and you get it wrong, you find out what the right answer is, that same question may reappear the next week in the 20-minute quiz. Right? So all the questions that I ask in the open book test may appear in future quizzes. Right, so bear that in mind. Remember that you have the option of reviewing the correct answers for all of these questions after the test is over. Okay, so that's what will take up most of your time each week. Now, you may have noticed that the outline for this course says that it's a lab course. That's why it's worth 4 credits instead of 3. And back at Columbia College, we have a wonderful anatomy lab that's filled with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of anatomical models, skeletons, muscle models, dissected organs, human and animal organs, slides, and so on. We can't get to it during the pandemic. So generally, when we were delivering this course in person, the weekly lab would be for the students to read a chapter in the coloring book, complete a coloring book exercise. They would come to the lab on their lab day. I would check the coloring book to make sure they'd done the exercise. And then we would begin the lab period by having a 20-minute quiz. And that's exactly what you're going to do, except over the internet. Right? The 20-minute quiz would be on all the previous organ systems. And then the students would spend the rest of the lab, about an hour and a half, I would hand out a test where they would do where they would answer questions about the anatomical models that we have in the lab. So they would do exercises with the models and the dissected organs. And that would be worth another 2% of their grade. So the quiz would be worth 2%. The in-lab exercise would be worth 2% as well. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we can't do that. So the open book exercise is meant to substitute for the anatomical models exercise. Right? So if the college eventually opens back up after we've conquered the coronavirus, the novel coronavirus, we can go back to that. But for now, the lab exercises are reading the coloring book, doing the 20-minute quiz on the previous readings, and doing the open book exercise for that week's reading assignment. That is considered to be the lab exercise, which is worth 44% of your grade. Right? So hopefully in the future we'll be able to get back into the anatomy lab, but as long as we have to stay at home due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the best we can do is to do this virtual lab where you're using your coloring book and answering questions about your coloring book rather than answering questions about some anatomical models that we have in the college anatomy lab. This is how the grades are distributed. So you do your weekly lab quizzes. They're worth 2% each for a total of 22%. We do our weekly open lab book exercise, open book coloring book exercises. Those are worth 22% in total. We have a midterm worth 20%, a test on muscles, which is worth 3%, a test on blood vessels, which is worth 3%, and a final exam, which is worth 30% for a total of 100%. Right, so this is what you're going to spend most of your week doing if you decide you want to stay in this course. Some of you might view this video and think I don't really like all of this. You're free to withdraw from the course. Bear in mind that if you have until Friday to withdraw from the course. You have until Friday the 11th or Saturday the 12th, I believe, to withdraw from the course and get all your money back. You can withdraw from the course later on, but you won't get any money back. And I believe you're able to withdraw from the course and get a W on your transcript, W meaning withdraw, for up until week 9 or something like that. So it's totally up to you. But most of your, try watching the first video and now I should mention that during the first week, I'm aware that most of you will not have your coloring book yet, so there's no quiz and no lab exercise for the first week. However, on the Moodle page, I've given you a PDF document called Handout 1, which does a little bit of explanation about an introduction to anatomy and anatomical positioning, which is the way that we describe different parts of the body. Is it above or below another body part? Is it to the left or right of another body part? There's a very specific language that anatomists use to describe these things. And so the first exercise is about that. So what's going to happen is during the first week we have no lab quiz, no lab open book test. During the second week we will have the first quiz, which is about Handout 1, and we will have open book exercise 1, which is about Handout 1 as well. Okay, then hopefully all of your coloring books will be in the mail and you will have received them by the third week. If you haven't received your book by the third week, I did download the PDF of chapters 1 and 2 to the website, so you can read those. And so during week 2, we have a quiz on the previous week's material, which is the handout. And then we have an open book exercise based on chapters 1 and 2 from the coloring book. And so you'll do that. And then in week 4, the quiz will be from chapters 1 and 2 of the coloring book, as well as the handout. That's all the previous material, plus the chapter on histology and the integument. And so you can see that the quizzes will just become more and more cumulative. They'll cover more and more things. But the weekly open book test will always only contain questions about the chapter that you were assigned to read that week. Okay, so that's how the course works. I would recommend that you read the handout that I've supplied, which goes into greater detail about how the course works, but this was just to give you a general overview. So good luck with the course, and I would also say have fun, although I know that studying is always a little bit stressful. But I hope when you look back on it someday after the stress is all gone, you will have found this to be a fun course, but also an informative course and a useful course. All right, and good luck, and I will see you at the next lecture number 1.